My mom once looked me straight in the eye and said, "Life would be better without you." At first, I thought it was just anger talking, but I was wrong. Stay with me as I open up about my story, and if it touches your heart in any way, please consider supporting by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear this. My name is Kenitra Vaughn. I was 17 when those words cut into me like a knife. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I was the type of girl who carried sketchbooks everywhere, who saw colors and shapes where others saw plain walls. I loved painting, drawing, creating little worlds no one else could see. But in my house, that meant nothing. My mother, Charisse, saw me not as her daughter, but as some heavy weight chained to her life. Every morning started with me in the kitchen, fixing breakfast, cleaning dishes, folding laundry. If Omari, my younger brother, left his socks in the living room, it was me who picked them up. If he forgot to finish his homework, it was me who stayed up late to help him. And when he showed up with a half-finished project, Charisse clapped her hands proudly and said, "That's my boy, so smart, just like his father." But when I brought home straight A's, she didn't even look up from her phone. I used to tell myself she was tired, that maybe she worked too hard and didn't have energy to notice me. But deep down, I knew better. There was a sharpness in her words, like she enjoyed reminding me that I was unwanted. One afternoon, I was helping her carry groceries inside when our neighbor came over, smiling and asking how we were doing. Charisse laughed and said, "At least Omari will make something of himself. Kenitra? She's nothing but wasted breath." She said it so casually, like it was a joke, but I froze. The neighbor looked at me awkwardly, shifting her weight, but my mom just kept unloading the bags like nothing happened. I wanted to disappear right there. It wasn't just a cruel comment, it was her truth. I wish I could say that was the only time she tore me down, but it wasn't. It became the air I breathed in that house. Omari shined, and I was the shadow. My father, Terrell, had left years ago after endless arguments with her, and sometimes I wondered if he left because of me. Maybe she was right. Maybe life really would have been better if I wasn't around. But here's the thing, I didn't want to believe that. A part of me kept fighting, clinging to my dreams, my art, the hope that one day someone would see me for who I was. Not wasted breath. Not a burden. Just Kenitra. And that's where my story begins. Every day in our house felt like walking through a one-sided contest I never signed up for. From the moment the sun came up, I was already on duty. I cooked breakfast, swept the floor, and made sure Omari had his backpack ready before school. If there was a mess in the living room, it was my job to clean it. If Omari needed help with homework, I was the one sitting next to him with a pencil in hand, guiding him through math problems until his answers made sense. My mom never asked him to do the same for me. It was always clear, I carried the weight of the home, and Omari carried the spotlight. What made it worse was how my mom, Charisse, treated even the smallest thing Omari did as a huge victory. If he remembered to take out the trash, she clapped like he'd won a medal. If he scored a C on a test, she hugged him and said, "That's my smart boy, I knew you could do it." Meanwhile, I'd bring home straight A's, carefully folded report cards shining with praise from my teachers, and she wouldn't even bother to look at them. Once, I laid my report card right in front of her while she scrolled through her phone, and she just pushed it aside without reading a single word. It stung every single time, but I kept working. School was my only way out, my only hope that maybe someday I could be free of this house where love was given out in pieces, and none of them ever seemed to land on me. I dreamed of going to college, of studying art, and maybe becoming a designer. I pictured myself sketching in studios, showing people what I saw in colors and shapes. But when I finally got the courage to tell my mom about my dream, she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not even a soft laugh, an ugly, dismissive laugh. "College? You? That's a joke. You don't have what it takes." I wanted to cry, but I swallowed it down. I learned early that tears only made her sharper. The truth was, my father Terrell had left years before. I didn't remember much, just loud arguments at night, voices cracking through the walls, and then one day he was gone. Sometimes, in the quiet, I wondered if he had seen what I saw in her. The bitterness, the constant need to control, the way she tore people down. I wondered if he'd left because of me, but a part of me knew it was her. He couldn't take it anymore. The lowest moment came one evening when I walked past the kitchen and heard my mom's voice. She was on the phone with someone, and she said it so plainly it made me stop in my tracks. I should have stopped at Omari and never had another child. Those words rang in my ears long after the call ended. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching my notebook against my chest. She didn't know I heard her, but in that moment, I understood the truth. I wasn't just unwanted. I was a mistake in her eyes. And nothing I did, no grades, no chores, no dreams, would ever change that. Kenitra had been planning for months, carefully filling out college applications late at night while everyone else was asleep. She'd sit at the kitchen table with her laptop, whispering her hopes to herself like a secret prayer. Art schools, state universities, anywhere that would take her. She just wanted a chance to get out. When she finally got a response from one of her dream schools, she felt her heart lift for the first time in years. They were offering her partial aid, but needed her mother's signature on the financial forms to process the rest. It was the only barrier standing between her and the future she'd worked so hard for. One evening, she approached Charisse with the papers neatly stacked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Mom, I just need you to sign these so I can finish my application. Please, it's important." Charisse didn't even look at the forms. She snorted, shaking her head as she scrolled through her phone. "You'll never make it. Why waste time and money?" She pushed the papers back across the table. "You're not going anywhere. Forget it." Kenitra felt her throat tighten, but said nothing. She'd learned that arguing only made things worse. She gathered the papers, pressing them against her chest as if she could shield her dreams from her mother's words. Days later, Omari's birthday rolled around. The living room was filled with bright wrapping paper, balloons, and a cake with his name written in thick frosting. Charisse surprised him with a brand new pair of sneakers and a gaming system he'd been begging for. Omari grinned, hugging her as she beamed with pride. Kenitra stood off to the side, invisible. There wasn't even a small gift bag or card for her. No one said anything, and she didn't dare ask. She just smiled tightly, clapping half-heartedly for her brother, and went back to the kitchen to wash the dishes. But inside, something hardened. That night, she took out the envelope hidden under her mattress. Inside was a small collection of wrinkled bills she'd saved from her part-time job at a diner across town. She'd been working there after school, wiping down tables and washing dishes, earning every dollar in silence. She wasn't sure how far it would take her, but it was hers. It was her way out. The breaking point came a week later. Charisse was in one of her moods, pacing and snapping at everyone. Kenitra asked a simple question about dinner, and her mother exploded. "You know what? Life would be better without you in it." The words hit like a slap. Kenitra froze, her hands trembling as she stared at the woman who was supposed to love her. In that moment, the last string of hope snapped. She didn't cry. She didn't shout back. She just walked away quietly, already making a plan in her head. She wasn't going to beg anymore. She was going to leave, and this time for good. The fight started like so many others, over something small, something meaningless. Kenitra had asked her mother a simple question about bills, and Charisse's temper flared. The shouting escalated quickly, words flying sharper than knives. But this time, it didn't stop at words. Charisse raised her hand and struck Kenitra across the face. The shock of it left Kenitra frozen for a moment, her cheeks stinging, her heart pounding. She had imagined leaving many times before, but at that moment she knew. This was it. She wasn't going to stay and take another blow. She didn't cry. She didn't even speak. She turned, walked to her room, and closed the door quietly behind her. Her hands moved almost automatically as she reached for the old duffel bag she kept in the closet. Into it she stuffed what little she could: 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, her sketchbook, and the small envelope of money she had saved from her diner job. $150. That was all she had. It didn't feel like much, but it felt like freedom. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Kenitra slung the bag over her shoulder and took one last look at the 4 walls that had never felt like home. She didn't say goodbye to Omari. She didn't leave a note. She just walked out into the night, her heart racing but steady with determination. At the bus station, the smell of diesel and coffee mixed in the air. She bought a Greyhound ticket to Atlanta, the cheapest destination far enough to make her mother's words fade behind her. She sat by the window, clutching her bag, staring out at the dark streets of North Carolina as the bus rumbled to life. For the first time, she was moving towards something unknown but hers alone. Those first nights were rougher than she imagined. When she arrived, the city felt big and cold. She had nowhere to stay. She dozed on hard benches in bus stations, curling up with her duffel as a pillow. Her meals came from vending machines, chips, crackers, bottles of water, anything to stretch her money. Every sound at night made her jump. Every hour felt like a test of her strength. But through the exhaustion, there was a strange sense of relief. No one was yelling. No one was telling her she was nothing. She was free, even if it hurt. She whispered to herself over and over like a promise. If she really believes life's better without me, she can live with that decision. The words didn't feel like defeat. They felt like a vow. Kenitra had left everything behind, but she still had herself. And for the first time, that felt like enough to start over. The city didn't welcome Kenitra with open arms, but it didn't crush her either. After days of wandering between bus stops and cheap cafes, she found herself standing in front of a 24-hour diner. The smell of grease and coffee wafted out the door, and a help-wanted sign hung crookedly in the window. She pushed the door open, her nerves rattling, and asked if they were still hiring. By the end of that night, she was handed an apron and shown to the back sink. The work was grueling. Plates stacked higher than her head, greasy pans that felt impossible to scrub clean, and endless hours standing until her legs ached. But it was work, and it was hers. Every paycheck was a lifeline, pulling her inch by inch out of the dark pit she'd fallen into. For the first time, her survival didn't depend on someone else's mood. It depended on her own two hands. It was at the diner that she met Reby Benson. Reby was one of the older servers, sharp-tongued with customers but soft when she spoke to Kenitra. She noticed the girl's tired eyes and the way she sometimes lingered after shifts, not wanting to go back out into the night. One evening, after catching Kenitra napping in the break room, Reby asked, "Baby, you got a place to sleep?" Kenitra hesitated, then shook her head. Without another word, Reby offered her the spare bed in her tiny rented room. The space was cramped, but to Kenitra it felt like luxury. Reby's kindness didn't stop there. She became a mentor, pushing Kenitra to see beyond the diner's four walls. "You're smart, baby. You don't belong behind that sink forever. Think bigger," she'd say, tapping Kenitra's forehead with a gentle finger. Those words lit something inside her, something her own mother had tried to snuff out. Encouraged by Reby, Kenitra started looking into community college. Filling out the forms felt like reopening an old wound, her mother's rejection still echoing in her head. But this time was different. She wasn't asking for Sharice's signature or her approval. She was doing it on her own. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Against all odds, she'd been accepted with a partial scholarship. Kenitra sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the paper to her chest. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't the tears of defeat she'd cried back home. These were tears of possibility. She thought about her mother, about all the times she'd been told she was worthless, and realized those words didn't hold power anymore. Life was still hard. She still worked long hours at the diner, still counted every dollar carefully, still felt the weight of loneliness some nights. But there was a difference now. For the first time, she believed in herself. She didn't need her mother's voice to guide her, because she had finally found her own. Kenitra had built a new rhythm for her life. 3 years had passed since she left North Carolina, and the girl who once slept in bus stations was now a young woman balancing college classes and late-night diner shifts. Her days were packed, her future finally beginning to take shape, and she kept her past tucked away like an old scar she didn't want to reopen. That was why, when her phone rang late one evening and Omari's name appeared on the screen, her first instinct was to ignore it. She hadn't spoken to her brother since the night she left. He had been too young to fully understand, too wrapped up in their mother's world. She let the phone buzz until it stopped, but moments later, it rang again. This time, curiosity got the better of her, and she answered. Omari's voice was hesitant, almost nervous. "Kenitra? It's me." For a moment, she couldn't speak. She had imagined hearing from him again, but never like this. His tone wasn't proud or smug like she remembered. It was heavy, almost broken. "Mom's not doing well," he finally said. "She's sick, and things at home are falling apart. Bills piling up, no money, the house, it's bad." His words tumbled out quickly, as though saying them too slowly would make them harder to admit. Kenitra felt her chest tighten, but she stayed quiet. She had learned to protect herself from the pull of guilt. Omari continued, his voice cracking. "I know you don't owe her anything. I know she hurt you. But she's alone. I can't handle it all by myself. Please, will you come see her?" The silence stretched between them. Kenitra stared at the floor, her mind racing. Memories surged back. The sting of her mother's hand, the nights of feeling invisible, the words that had chased her away. Life would be better without you. How could she walk back into that house, into those memories, after clawing her way into a life of her own. "I don't think I can," she said softly. "Omari, you don't know what it was like for me. You don't know the things she said." "I do now," he whispered. "She's not the same. She's broken, Kenitra. And I think she knows it." Kenitra closed her eyes. Part of her wanted to hang up, to protect the fragile peace she had built. Why should she give her mother another chance to hurt her? But another part of her, deep and complicated, stirred with conflict. This was still her family, even if they had never treated her like it. When she ended the call that night, she was left with a storm inside her. Could she confront the woman who had tried to crush her spirit, or was it better to let her rot in the ruin she had created? The choice weighed on her like a stone, pressing down on the freedom she had fought so hard to win. The drive back to North Carolina felt heavier than any bus ride she had taken years before. Kenitra had built a whole new world for herself in Atlanta, but as she stepped out of the car and looked at the house she once called home, it was like time collapsed around her. The white paint was peeling, the shutters hung crooked, and the yard was swallowed in weeds. It no longer looked like the neat, proud home her mother had once boasted about. Instead, it sagged under the weight of neglect. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Piles of clutter filled corners, unpaid bills littered the counter, and the once bright living room felt dim and small. Kenitra's chest tightened as she stepped over the threshold. Every inch of the house held memories she had tried to bury, and yet here she was, face to face with the past. Charisse sat in the recliner, a blanket over her legs. She looked older, her hair grayer, her frame thinner. Still, her chin tilted upward with that same stubborn pride, as if admitting weakness might kill her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Omari, standing nearby, broke the silence with a sigh. "Kenitra, it's worse than I told you on the phone," he said quietly. "The lights were shut off last month. I've been scraping money to keep them on since. The car's gone, repossessed. And the hospital bills." His voice trailed off, the weight of it all pressing down. Kenitra's eyes flicked to her mother, waiting for her to acknowledge it. Finally, Charisse shifted, her voice raspier than Kenitra remembered. "I thought you'd fail without me," she admitted, each word dragged out like it hurt to say. Her eyes flickered up to her daughters. "Instead, I'm the one who failed." The words might have sounded like an apology to someone else, but to Kenitra they weren't enough. Years of silence, of pain, of being told she was nothing, it all swelled inside her chest. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "You don't get to say that now like it erases everything. You told me I was wasted breath. You told me life would be better without me. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you know what it's like to leave your own house with nothing but a bag and $150 because your own mother wanted you gone?" Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "I survived without you, and you can't take credit for that. You broke me down, and I had to build myself back up alone." Charisse blinked, her face hardening, but no sharp reply came. Maybe she didn't have the strength anymore, or maybe the truth was too heavy. Kenitra stood there, breathing hard, the silence of the room filled with everything she had finally said out loud. She didn't forgive. She didn't soften. For once, she let her mother feel the full weight of every wound she had left behind. Kenitra stood tall in that broken-down living room, no longer the timid girl who once hid her dreams in a sketchbook. She had faced her mother's words, her blows, and her rejection, and now she had something powerful her mother never expected. Proof that she had made it without her. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were copies of her scholarship letters, her community college acceptance, and even a few sketches she had created for a small local gallery show. She laid them on the cluttered table in front of Charisse. "This," Kenitra said firmly, "is what I've done without you." Charisse's eyes flicked over the papers, her face tightening. The woman who once sneered at Kenitra's ambition now sat trembling, staring at evidence that the daughter she dismissed had carved out a future. Omari leaned forward, his voice soft but full of awe. "Kenitra, you really did all this?" "I did," she replied, her voice steady. "I worked nights washing dishes. I saved every dollar I could. I found people who believed in me when my own family didn't. I earned my place. You told me I'd never make it, but here I am." Charisse's lips quivered, her pride fighting against the weight of the truth. For the first time, the sharpness in her eyes dulled, replaced by something almost fragile. She pressed a hand to her forehead, her voice breaking. I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd fall back on me. I thought you'd need me. But instead," her words collapsed into silence, and for the first time, Kenitra saw her mother look small, almost defeated. But Kenitra didn't soften. She had waited too long, carried too much pain, and this moment wasn't about pity. It was about standing in her truth. "You drove me out," she said quietly but firmly. "You told me life would be better without me. And guess what? You were right. My life is better without you." Charisse's tears slipped down her cheeks, but Kenitra didn't move to comfort her. The revenge wasn't in screaming or insults. It was in standing there alive, successful, and untouchable. Her triumph was the sharpest answer she could ever give. Omari looked between them, torn, but Kenitra shook her head gently. "I'm not here to fix this house. I'm not here to clean up her mistakes. She made this life, and now she has to live with it." With that, she gathered her folder, slipped it back into her bag, and turned toward the door. The floor creaked beneath her steps, but her shoulders were squared, her head high. For the first time in her life, she walked out not as a broken girl, but as a woman who had chosen her own path. Behind her, the house sagged in silence, and Charisse was left to face the ruins she had built with her own hands. As Kenitra reached for the doorknob, Omari's voice cut through the silence. "Please don't go yet," he said, his tone desperate. She turned to see him standing there, shoulders slumped, eyes pleading. He looked so much younger in that moment, not the spoiled little brother she remembered, but a man who had been carrying too much on his own. "Kenitra, I can't do this by myself," he admitted. "She's sick, the bills are everywhere, and I don't know what to do. If you leave again, I'll be the only one left." His voice cracked, and for a moment her heart ached for him. But Kenitra had spent years learning the hard way where her responsibilities ended. She stepped closer, her voice calm but unshakable. "Omari, I built my life without her. She'll have to live with that. I know you love her, and I know she's still your mom, but I can't sacrifice myself to patch up everything she destroyed." Omari looked down, fists tightening at his sides. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away again?" Kenitra sighed, her chest heavy with the weight of his disappointment. "I'm not walking away from you, Omari. I'll always be your sister. But I am walking away from her. I have to, because if I stay, I'll lose everything I've fought for, and I won't let that happen." The silence stretched, and finally Omari nodded, though his eyes were glassy. He understood, even if it hurt. Kenitra touched his arm gently, then stepped outside, the cool air hitting her face like a reminder of freedom. Back in Atlanta, the city welcomed her as though it had been waiting all along. She settled into her routine with more determination than ever. Her classes at community college pushed her harder, but she threw herself into the work, pouring every ounce of pain and resilience into her art. The diner shifts continued, but now they felt lighter, as if each plate she washed was just another step towards something better. Months passed, and slowly, the pieces of her dream began to take shape. A professor noticed her sketches and encouraged her to apply for a larger program. A small gallery displayed one of her works, and for the first time, strangers admired her talent. Each milestone reminded her she wasn't the girl her mother had tried to break. She was the woman who had survived it all. Back home, the Vaughn family remained fractured. Omari visited when he could, sending updates through short phone calls. Charisse stayed in the same house, her health fading, her pride swallowed by silence. Kenitra didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. The distance was no longer a wound. It was a boundary. Kenitra carried no chains, no guilt, no lingering need for approval. She had chosen her life, built it piece by piece, and every day she lived it was proof that she had won. Kenitra sat by the window of her small apartment in Atlanta, the hum of the city drifting through the glass. Outside, the lights flickered like stars, each one a reminder of how far she had come. She had spent so long believing she needed to shout her worth at the world, but now, in the quiet of her own space, she realized she didn't have to. Her revenge had never been about yelling or screaming or going back to make her mother pay. It had been about living. Every class she attended, every paycheck she earned, every sketch she created was a quiet answer to the voice that once told her she was nothing. She thought of the girl she had been, 17, scared, with a duffel bag and $150. That girl had been small but fierce, even if she didn't know it yet. She had believed, deep down, that she could make something of herself without anyone's permission. And she had. That was her victory. Her mother's voice, once so loud in her mind, had faded to a distant echo she no longer needed to silence. Kenitra's heart softened as she thought about the people who had stepped into her life when she needed them most. Reby Benson, with her steady guidance and open door, had become more of a mother to her than Charisse ever had. Co-workers who treated her with respect, professors who believed in her talent, friends who celebrated her successes instead of dismissing them. These were the family she had built. They weren't tied to her by blood, but by choice, and that made the bond stronger. She still heard from Omari now and then, short calls or messages. She wished him well, but didn't ask too much about the old house. Some wounds didn't need to be reopened, and some answers she no longer cared to know. Her life was no longer measured by the pain of her past, but by the freedom she had claimed. As she prepared her portfolio for another gallery submission, Kenitra smiled to herself. It wasn't the smile of someone who had escaped. It was the smile of someone who had rebuilt, piece by piece, until her life finally fit her dreams. She whispered under her breath, not with bitterness but with truth. Mom said life would be better without me. And she was right, it was better for me. It wasn't triumph in the way people expect. No dramatic confrontation, no grand moment of payback. Her triumph was the quiet power of thriving in spite of everything. She had turned her mother's rejection into fuel, her pain into purpose. And as she looked out at the glowing city, she knew that was the strongest revenge of all. She didn't just survive her mother's cruelty, she had outgrown it. She had built a life her mother could never take credit for, and that life was her victory. Do you believe Kenitra made the right choice by cutting ties and building her own life? Or should she have stayed and tried to fix things with her family? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I'd really love to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another.